Welcome to the Morning Phillips series hosted today on YouTube. The Morning Phillips series, originally hosted at the Garage co-working space in Rapid City, South Dakota, was created to discuss philanthropy, civil society, and community. It is an opportunity to have a conversation with good people doing good things creatively and collaboratively. The format is a conversation, not a presentation. 2 tables, 2 chairs, 2 computers, and a community of interested people. Today, we are pleased to have with us a nonprofit leader, a New Yorker, Texan, and Minnesotan, and father. Maybe Duchesne will share a little bit about that. A special thanks to the Bush Foundation, the Numad Group, Rural Philanthropy Institute, and the Garage for hosting today's conversation. Thanks to all who have joined us for nearly 60 previous in-person conversations. Now, with all that, we are pleased to welcome the president of Minnesota Public Radio, Duchesne Drew. Duchesne, thanks so much for this time and being with us. And I do hope we have time to get to New Yorker, Texan, and Minnesotan. I don't know if you actually claim all 3 of those, but thanks for doing this morning.
Thanks, Matt. It's good to be with you.
Duchesne, you just started a new role. Will you talk about this new role as Minnesota Public Radio's president? First, congratulations. And what a time to take on this position. How has it been?
Thank you. It's been great. I started at Minnesota Public Radio at the beginning of May, so about 2.5 months ago. And the role is multifaceted. You know, MPR is a regional division, essentially, of a larger media company called American Public Media Group. And MPR has Minnesota Public Radio News, which covers our entire state. It has an indie music station called The Current, and has classical NPR, which, as the name suggests, plays classical music. And in addition to the radio services and the music, you know, as part of that, that's what we're known for. It's a pretty large organization that manages everything from underwriting, you know, advertising to support our work to membership. I imagine some of the folks on the call right now are members of Minnesota Public Radio. Thank you. And a whole host of other areas. We produce a bunch of events. We do a fair amount of community engagement. It's become virtual, much like this event. If it's for normal times, I'd be sitting a few feet across from you in Rapid City, right? And so we do a bunch of in-person gatherings that have moved to virtual gatherings. And we just do a whole host of things that are designed to inform and entertain and inspire and connect our region. And so I've stepped into a role that's really focused on trying to elevate the work that we do and trying to help us connect more meaningfully to more people across the region with for me, a particular commitment to really building our connections in communities that maybe don't think we're programming with them in mind, really trying to punch into some communities and build deep, meaningful relationships and spaces that I won't say we're absent, like we don't do anything in those areas. Those relationships aren't as strong as they could be. So we're going to make more of an effort in those communities.
Duchesne, you've had 25 years of experience in news. Why this position? And I know we've got lots to talk about over the next hour. And from race to the position to leadership to our society today, but yeah, why this position? Why was this a good fit for you?
This was a great opportunity for many reasons. MPR is an institution in Minnesota and really in some respects, you know, across the region. And so I saw this as a great opportunity to have an impact on and through an organization that I've got deep affection for. I moved here in 1993 for a summer internship at the Star Tribune and got hired and found MPR pretty soon after landing here and became a member in 1994. So my membership card that's in my wallet will tell you that, you know, it's one example of how long the relationship is, but also how critical it was for me in figuring out where I had landed. And we continue to do that. We continue to help people here understand this place, whether they've spent their entire lives here, we're helping them understand how it's evolving, or newcomers who are coming into the Twin Cities, coming into other parts of Minnesota. We're kind of I think, an anchor institution as far as helping people get their bearings and understand, like, the great things about Minnesota as well as things that we need to work on. And so for me, the attraction was being able to, especially because we've got news and music in terms of our services, being able to connect with folks all across the region in more meaningful ways and being able to help to connect them one to another. Very appealing to me.
And what a time to take this on. You started looking at this role, and nobody had talked about or heard of COVID-19,
right?
Much less
right
where we are in a pandemic. And then the murder of George Floyd and the light that's been shined on so many injustices. How has this time been for you in this role as you shape this organization in the way that you're trying to do?
Yeah, it's been challenging and rewarding. It's been, this whole period is so complicated. So I live probably less than 5 miles from where George Floyd was killed. Quite familiar. I live in St. Paul. That happened in Minneapolis, but I live pretty far west in St. Paul. And so I'm intimately familiar with the community in which this happened, and intimately familiar with the issues that underlie it. And it was incredibly sad, just as someone who's a member of this community, as someone who has chosen to make a life here, raise my children here. Lots of emotions flowed as that story was unfolding. And at the same time, I was really heartened by how well the folks at MNPR stepped up to cover the news on the news side and to provide both information and music and, solace on the music side. Just really, we used all the tools we had available to us to lean in and offer this region what they should expect of us, actually, in times like this, in tough times. We have to be able to lean in and do what we can to help people understand and make sense of things that may on some level are senseless, but if we're honest and we look at our history and we look at the way our society is built, it makes sense that we get these kinds of outcomes because we built things in a particular way and we tolerated things that are getting a harder look today than they were getting 3 months ago. So as painful as it was, I also think it's an opportunity for us to stop and take a look at how our communities are built and why they're built a particular way and what we might do to make them healthier.
Sean, I've really appreciated the conversations that we've had over the years, and yesterday visiting with some community members as well. And one of the things that during this time I think people realize more is that we look at the world differently simply because of our race. As a Black man, you see the world in a way that I don't see it as a white man, with my experiences in life and your experiences in life. And we look at, I feel terrible about the murder of George Floyd and the number of citizens that have been arrested for protesting the murder of Breonna Taylor. It's upsetting to look at the abuse of power that seems to be present with authorities. It's disappointing in our society that far more minorities are impacted by the health and economic realities of COVID-19. How do you, with your perspective, not only in this role, but as a person living in the Twin Cities, how do you feel at this time with our country struggling with so much?
Yeah, it's been tough, and the only good thing about it, honestly, what happened to George Floyd was horrific. What happened to Breonna Taylor was horrific, but it's drawn attention to issues that are day in, day out issues for African Americans and for other people of color in the U.S. And so, if we're, it seems to me that we may be at a time, it's too early to really say, but if out of all this pain comes an honest reflection and an honest reckoning of what the realities are, in our communities, then something good may flow. It's not a given. It's too early to say that we're going to figure this out or fix it. But I've been encouraged by the fact that so many people have stopped to really take a look at the communities that they're in and have spoken up to say that they want to address issues of racism, systemic racism in their midst, and that they want better leadership and more thoughtful programs and policies and laws in place to offer up just safer and more equitable communities and outcomes for people of color. I mean, as you said, we move through this world differently. I mean, race is a construct. There isn't on a DNA level a meaningful difference between the two of us, right? But the way our society is built, the world sees and treats us in different ways. And there are historical reasons for it, but they're not all historical realities. They're present day realities. And I think too many people often think, well, you know, slavery ended 150 plus years ago, and you know, all these other things are in the way in the rearview mirror. And what people often fail to recognize is that they have strands that run right through to the present day that lead to uneven outcomes, uneven opportunities, and that there's work that we should be doing, that we can be doing to create the kind of liberty and the kind of equity that we often espouse, and that I think many people think is already present, but isn't for too many of us. And so there's this moment in time is an opportunity for us to take a few more steps toward being as good as we say we are.
When you think of those strands that are through our history in the United States, what strands stand out to you? What strands?
So if you think about, you know, education in our country, right? You go from, you know, on backside. I'll go back to slavery. The slaves were not educated for anything other than field work, right? And some homemaking skills, right? And so we've never had in this country the kinds of investment in communities of color and education that would give folks an even shot at making the most of what this country has to offer. You know, I was an education reporter for many, many years. You know, my background in journalism, most of that was as an education reporter when I was still out in community recovering. The resources that go into schools where you find Black and brown children, Native children, pale in comparison to what you see in most white communities. And some of that's about class. Much of it's about class. It's at times hard to separate the two, but a good bit of it is also about race. And to the degree that we look at schools often being formed based on school populations being formed based on where people live, we've had so many instances of redlining and other practices that really limit where people of color can live, that we create schools that are exclusive, and we create schools that are disadvantaged, and that perpetuates the challenges that communities face. And there are things we can do. They might be uncomfortable for some folks because people are used to the way things are built, but there are things we could do to make the educational experiences of our young people more balanced, and to give more young folks growing up in this country as Americans opportunities to really to maximize and truly pursue the American dream. And I just think many people just never see it. I mean, we're all kind of in our bubbles, and people don't have oftentimes very much awareness to what the realities are of folks living even just a few miles away, much less hundreds of miles away. And so education is one example because it opens up so many other doors, but our criminal justice system is uneven. Our healthcare systems are uneven. Just almost every aspect of life in this country is experienced differently by people of color than it is by white folks.
You see, and you just said people don't see it. I think that's really, really true. That, I mean, you white people say all the time, when I'm not racist, I just don't know anybody that doesn't look like me because they don't live in my neighborhood, or it's not necessarily intentional. To your point, it's a systemic issue that people don't even realize that they're a part of. Would you agree?
And it's often the case. It's also for many people the way things have always been, so they don't question it, right? And so it's one of those deals where if you grow up in an environment that is not totally diverse, or maybe it's somewhat diverse, but there are people in particular tracks or particular boxes, and that's just always been the way it is. I don't know how many people stop to think about why that is. And what perpetuates it, and what we could do to have a different outcome if it were something that we're invested in doing. And so, whether people intend to be racist or not is probably less the issue than, what the outcomes are, right? Mm-hmm. And I think one of the potential, I'll say potential again, because it's yet to bear out, but one of the potential upsides of what's flowed since George Floyd was killed is that I think more of us are stopping to question how we got to now, and on a community level, but also stopping to think about what we can do individually to help create healthier communities. As I said, I think that the folks who've largely kind of moved through life without thinking too much about it now have paused long enough to recognize that there are concrete things that we can each do to strengthen our communities and to make them more equitable. And I use the word equity because I think different people do need different things. Equality is one for me, one for you, two for me, two for you. And we've created a society where people start off well behind the starting line that most people imagine is there. We've built a society that has many, many strengths. I love the life that I've got. I feel really blessed. I don't walk around all day with my head down. I also know that my standard of living and my career path and other things that my wife and I built together truly are not that common for African Americans in our country. And so it shouldn't be a matter of beating the odds, right? It should be a matter of getting up every day and making the most of the opportunities in front of you. And I think when we look at even some of the looting and the sort of the more violent demonstrations, which was disappointing on some level, I read much of that as kind of a cry for help and anger rising up from folks who, in many, not in all, but in many instances, just they're at their wits' end, and they're not getting up and heading off to the kinds of jobs that many of us enjoy, and they're not sending their kids off to schools that they feel confident are going to prepare them to lead better lives. And so there's a lot of value in this moment when we're seeing things happen that are confusing and frustrating and even maddening, to pause and wonder why people are acting the way they are, why their response looks different than what we imagine we would do. But I think it's important to stop and remember that we're not them, and also begin to try and better understand like what led them to this point, where that's the task that tack that they're going to take. It's not by accident.
The question that you put, you just mentioned, how did we get to where we're at? How did we get here? I think is one that definitely has been in my mind and around the people that I have talked with. But the question that I hear as well from in conversations with people is, so what do we do? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you want to be like, this isn't we should go check these boxes and then that'll be that, and we can keep going with our lives. This is much bigger. This is more fundamental to how do we want to live? How do we want to feel about each other? Mm-hmm. How do we want to treat one another? But it seems to me that the question that we go to, because it's how we're wired as a society, it seems, okay, what do we need to do? And let's get that done and keep going.
Yeah, if only it were that simple. I mean, one of the simple things I think we could do, and it's simple and it's not, right? I think we could be more intentional about reading up on the history of our own country. I think too few of us actually understand how this place was built. and I think if you understood the history of the country more deeply, you would have not just greater empathy for people who are struggling, but then begin to see more clearly what we should probably be changing and where we should be making investments. So as I said already, I think there's an important distinction between equality, where there's the one for me, one for you, and equity. Like, well, what do you need to be healthy? What do you need to be safe? What do you need to be able to take full advantage of what the country has to offer? What do you need to be able to fully contribute to the talents and skills and gifts that God gave you? And so I say it that way because we have so many people, so many communities living in distress, by design, if we're really honest about it. If we look at the way policies and practices have over time shaped communities, created systems basically that shaped pretty narrow pathways for some of us. And what saddens me about that is all of the lost talent. You think about all the people whose gifts are not being realized, all the people who could be doing any number of things, from providing healthcare to providing music to teaching our kids to patrolling our streets in ways that make us truly feel safe, who are on completely different tracks because of the environments that they're growing up in. And willpower is real, but the truth is so much of who we are and what we become is shaped by the communities we grow up in, is shaped by the resources brought to bear, and shaped by the histories of our families and of our communities and of our region to some extent, right? And so I think we can make better choices about how we prepare young people, especially, to step into adulthood and give them true preparation to do any range of things. My kids have grown up in a house where they knew that they could choose what they wanted to do as they kind of discovered their own gifts and interests, right? I think too few children grow up and get through high school still feeling like they can do pretty much anything, and as a result, I think we lose, in many respects, they're our most valuable resource, and we kind of lose and misuse their gifts and their talents.
Duchesne makes me think of former Morning Philip guest and a professor at Washington University in St. Louis, who wrote he, with other colleagues, produced a report called For the Sake of All, which looked at the Delmar Divide in St. Louis. So north of Delmar, predominantly African-American, and south of Delmar, some of the wealthiest places. And actually that's been in the news recently, where this divide and just around Forest Park in St. Louis. But what Jason Purnell reported was a child born north of Delmar, a girl born north of Delmar, would live 9 years on average, fewer years than somebody south of Delmar. And just in the last weeks, that south of Delmar included the place where, I've forgotten the couple that's been in the news with their automatic weapons out. As you're speaking, I'm just thinking about this true divide in this region, and of course, that north of Delmar, Ferguson, where Michael Brown was killed, began as, to my understanding, St. Louis had all the red lines, and real estate was sold to houses, white family to a white family to a white family, and then as that, and there's then the change in that here we are. But to your point of where we're born has such an impact on where we go.
Right.
who we become and what opportunities we have.
Yeah, more than it should, and we are in a country, and certainly here in the Twin Cities, we're seeing it. We are becoming more diverse, and I spent a lot of my time working with other business leaders, community leaders, and one of my refrains is, if people of color continue to fail at the same rates that we have been in this community, and you could say in this country, and yet we become a larger piece of the pie, then our society is failing, right? And I think in some respects you could argue it is today, right? Just everyone isn't feeling it in quite the same way. But we've got to find a way to really see and value and care for one another in ways that don't have race undermining that, and race being used as an excuse not to make investments in people, because those same people can be the engineers and can be, the airline pilots, and can be just all the things that we need in our society, right? People of color do at much lower rates in terms of the professions, right? Because the pathways to those opportunities are so narrow. And we need to find ways of expanding those pathways and really opening up for all of us the potential, tapping into the potential that's there, or we're not going to continue to enjoy as a society so many of the things that make life great for many of us, and so many of the things that define what being an American means.
Sean, you mentioned your children. What do you talk to your children about regarding this? How do you talk to your children about this?
Yeah, it's changed over the years. So I've got a son who's 18 going on 19, and a daughter who just turned 17. So they're big kids, right? They're young adults at this point. And so we're able to have more sophisticated and more nuanced conversations now than we could when they were, 6 and 8. Mm-hmm. And talk to them about the fact that they've been really fortunate, and they've got a platform that they can go anywhere from. My wife and I have been married almost 25 years. We bought this house in St. Paul before we had kids, and we bought it because of the elementary school at Track 2, because we knew it was a good school. And so I say the way of saying, they grew up in a house with two parents who were very intentional and resourced. Mm-hmm. And now they're, as one's done with high school, one will be in another year, and they can do any number of things. And what we've talked to them about is that they've got this huge opportunity, right? And they've got, along with that, a fair amount of responsibility to make the most of the gifts that they've got and the opportunities that they've had. And we've also talked to them about the fact that, despite the fact that they've worked incredibly hard for the opportunities that they've received, there'll be people at times who will expect less of them because of the color of their skin. There'll be people at times who will actively work to undermine them because of the color of their skin. There'll be people at times who they're going to just have to learn how to navigate. And it doesn't mean you walk around with a chip on your shoulder all the time, but it would be foolhardy not to have those kinds of conversations, because those things really do happen. I mean, as horrific as what happened to George Floyd is, that's not the everyday undermining that Black folks experience. It's more often, and other people of color for that matter, it's more often folks that we work with and that we engage with who don't really see in and for us what they see in and for their own children and their own close friends. And so we've got some blinders on in our society about what people are capable of, and it shapes in at times in really ugly and unfortunate ways. It shapes how we connect and how we invest in one another and the kinds of opportunities that people get. And so what we've prepared our children for is a world that will reward them in most cases for their hard work, and a world at times that won't properly reward them for their hard work, but that one that they have to continue to navigate and to move through, because you can't curl up in a fetal position every time you don't get your way or every time you think you're treated unfairly. Doesn't mean you ignore it, but you can't be derailed by it either. And so it's this ability we try to build in them to recognize it when it pops up, and to figure out a way over it, through it, around it, under it, to stay focused.
What a whole nother lens to look at the world, from my perspective, that to be able to respond. How do you even arm your children to be able to do that, as well as just all the other things that everybody is trying to get through, to then be able to also deal, not ignore, as you said, but to work through, go over, under, however, to get through it. That's just something that's not been part of my life. I don't know how that would make you feel to have to struggle with everything.
Yeah, it saddens me, and at the same time, what's the alternative, right? You can't have your head explode, and you can't give up, right? And you can't be looking for it around every corner. It's not a matter of that either. It's just being prepared for it to pop up now and then, recognizing it for what it is, and figuring out, okay, well, it's problem solving in some respects. Okay, now what? How do I get from where I am to where I'm trying to get, right? And the truth of the matter is that their path should be easier than my path or their mom's path. Their path should be easier than their grandparents' path. Their path should be a lot easier than the great-grandparents' path. And so I think part of what should fuel them is that understanding that they've got opportunities, and as I said as well, responsibilities, but they've got opportunities that weren't afforded as readily to their ancestors, and often are not afforded to other people in the present day who look like them.
It's a really generous way to approach it, Duchesne, I think. You were a member of Minnesota Public Radio in 1994.
Soon after I moved here, yeah.
And now you're the president of Minnesota Public Radio. So take us through that path, will you?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I spent 20 years at the Star Tribune. I started as a summer intern and got hired and spent a number of years as a reporter, much of it as an education reporter, moved into editing, first Metro Twin Cities team, and then the St. Paul Bureau, the East Metro into Western Wisconsin on the news side, shifted over and ran the business section for a couple of years, then shifted over back into the Metro section, which was sort of, the section I had grown up in as a Metro reporter, and did that for a bit. And then my last role there, I was managing editor for operations, which was in many respects great preparation for the job I'm in now, because I had, in that role, I was over the production, so the copy and design desks and newsroom IT, but that I was also the dotted line between the newsroom and most of the other departments of the company. So in that regard, it looks more like my current role. So I had a dotted line to the IT department and to marketing and advertising and circulation, the folks who sell the newspaper to subscribers. I had a dotted line to the printing plant, so I had to learn more about operations. So it got my head up and out and beyond the newsroom. And I had a bit of a dotted line to human resources as well, because I was the newsroom's recruiter and training manager. And so, as I said, about 20 years at the paper, couple as well in Dallas in the middle that I'll skip for now, other than to say that my wife and I discovered we were not meant to be North Texans. So we moved back to Minnesota, even though neither of us is originally from here.
Do you like the winters?
Yeah, I missed having all four seasons. And the summers down there, my last summer in Texas was 1999, and we had 40 days with highs over 100, and we had 28 days of those, 28 days rather, in a row at one point. So I discovered, this is not the case for everyone, but that the summer in Dallas was worse for me than the winter in Minneapolis, St. Paul, if I had to pick. So I left the newspaper about 5.5 years ago to go work at the Bush Foundation, and loved that role, loved the people there, got a chance to do grant making over the 5 years I was there, and ton of community engagement. My first trip actually out of the office, wearing a Bush Foundation hat, so to speak, was to Rapid City. And so that community is near and dear to my heart. I'd been before, but it was great to come and get a chance to meet so many longtime community leaders and to see the investments that had been made over the years with Archie Bush's and Edith Bush's investment in the region through the foundation, and to understand more deeply what people's aspirations are, and to figure out with others like what we could do to help advance those dreams. And so spent 5 years doing that in communities all across the region, and got a call from a search firm last year, I think it was December, toward the end of the year, about this role. And it's sort of funny, I don't think I told you this before, but I didn't call them back right away. I was like, oh, they must not know that my wife works there. I couldn't possibly be president of MNPR. Angela works there. Someone must not have told them, right? And so I actually sent the email that they sent me to a bunch of friends saying, hey, this is a great job. In fact, I would apply for it if Angela didn't work at NPR. Help me spread the word. If you run into somebody who's interested and wants to learn more, have them give me a call. I'm happy to tell them about, I know about the org, but I can tell them a ton about the community. And then, a few weeks passed and they called back and like, did you get our last note? And I was like, well, I didn't call back right away because and she's like, yeah, we're well aware of your wife. We know. We still have to talk to you. And so it took a few months. It took a while. But to the point you made earlier, when this began, COVID wasn't on the radar in a meaningful way. I'm sure it bubbled up already in other parts of the world, but it wasn't real here yet. It wasn't a concern here yet. And by the time I got the job, my last interviews were all on Zoom. And I actually, I still haven't physically met most of the people I work with because I'm in my living room most days, right? And they are in their respective home offices. So the path to NPR was a long one, but the great thing about my background in journalism and the work I've done, not just in grant making, but a lot of it's been through community engagement, I think really has been great preparation for what this role requires. I know and love this region deeply. I'm excited about the work we're already doing, but also the potential I see for us to be even more authentically connected to more parts of this region. And the people I work with are excited about that. I think that there's deep interest in better understanding this place and pockets that often don't feel, as I said already, that we're programming with them in mind. And that doesn't happen overnight. It will take time, but it's work that we're excited about doing. And I'm eager, in the same way that I was eager to get out across the region on behalf of the Bush Foundation, building and deepening relationships. I'm eager to do that for NPR as well.
Duchesne, can you give examples of some of those pockets that you see, or the types of pockets that you see that you're referencing?
Certainly, he'll be more direct. So we have people of color who listen to Minnesota Public Radio and who are members, but not anywhere near in relation to or proportion to their numbers in the region. So I'm going to be working with others to build deeper relationships in communities of color. We'll be working aggressively to make sure that in and beyond the Twin Cities, we're deepening our relationship with Native American communities as well. We do have relationships already, so I don't want to suggest like we're absent. It's just it's not what it could be, and it's not what it's gonna be. And the reality is that it's a walking the talk thing for me, right? Like I just feel so strongly that I want all of Minnesota to wake up every day wondering what NPR has to offer, and to expect to find good things, and expect to find things that are going to resonate with them, and expect to find things that will help them better understand people and issues that maybe aren't present for them. It doesn't have to be. In fact, that's in some respects maybe the biggest gift, is when you have a window into someone else's world, someone else's perspective. That's a big part of the role we play as journalists on journalism side. But even with the music, I think there's so much potential for us to be better connected to one another through music, and whether it's sharing some of the same traditions, or just learning to understand and appreciate someone else's musical traditions. All of that is really valuable, and it can help deepen our understanding and appreciation of one another. And I think if we've got more of that flowing through the region, lots of other good things will flow from it, you know. So for much of it is just, you know, getting out and developing authentic relationships with people, deepening the ones that are there to help have them help us shape our programming, and to do things with community in ways that they find valuable and meaningful, and to do it in ways that we are even more of a town square where people can come to connect and better understand the issues of the day and celebrate the best parts of who we are.
You just mentioned the walk the talk, right? An earlier reference that we have to do the work ourselves. I think those are two different. They're similar, but I wanted to maybe go back to what you mean by we have to do the work, not only about learning about our history. And it almost seems to me that the walk the talk in your mind today in your role, that's an extension of that in some ways. Can you help me
synthesize it? Yeah. So on some level, I think our job, and we've had deep discussions already internally, right? Our job on the journalism side, and I'll talk about the music in a second, but I'll start with journalism. On the journalism side, right, we have to be able to connect with people all across the region who have different life stories, who have different histories, who have different perspectives, and different, at times, different hopes and dreams, right? We have to be able to be in conversation with them and understand what they're actually saying, understand the context for what they're saying and what they're driving toward, so that when we then project it out to the rest of the region as we're telling their story, we're not twisting it. Right? We have to have clear eyes on the people and issues that we're trying to cover and then project out. We've got to get better at that, which means, you know, doing some inner work and some collective work to understand the cultural differences that just exist across our society, right? And to do it in ways that ensure that when those same people see their stories being told, it feels authentic to them. So, you know, oftentimes you will hear, for good reason, that people of color don't trust the media and don't trust particular media outlets. And it's because they often feel that the stories that are told about them and their issues are either intentionally mischaracterized, or the people coming in don't understand them or their issues well enough to accurately capture and then reflect back out to everyone else what the realities are. And so we're going to actively work at getting better at that, right? Because what you want is for the people you're covering to say, yeah, that rings true. That's how I experience it. This is a true reflection of my perspectives or my realities, whatever you might be. And you want people who are on a completely different part of the dial to be able to trust that when they come and they hear that report or read it online or engage with it in some way, that you got it right. You know, and so you want everybody, regardless of where they are on the dial, when we look at the issues that speak to what their realities are, that they feel that their perspectives are accurately captured, and that they can trust that the perspectives of other people being offered up are equally authentic for those communities. And this is a struggle that all media outlets have. I want us to be especially good at it. I think that will meaningfully change the ways we connect with communities as an institution, but it also will change their ability to meaningfully connect with each other. On the music side, it's very similar. I mean, music can be something that really ties us together, and music is culture. And so even if it's something that isn't your favorite, isn't, you know, I think so many of our musical tastes get locked in when we're like in our 20s and 30s, right? And so it's the goal isn't to have everybody suddenly like one kind of music, right? It's
Prince.
made to, right. Well, then if you got to pick one, you would not be wrong to start with Prince, right? But it's one of those deals where music can be just a great way to better understand the world around us and to understand our own traditions, but also to step in and understand other people's. And so I think we've got just one of the things I love about NPR is we've got multiple ways, so many different kinds of tools to help connect with and connect the community. And the work we've got to do is to work on our own cultural or intercultural fluency so that we're able to connect meaningfully across a wider range on the spectrum, and then to use that ability as a way to help Minnesota and the region really see itself more clearly. And as I said, one of my goals is for us to value each other more deeply. I think you're more likely to value folks if you understand them. And so that's an opportunity and a responsibility that we have at NPR. And the walking the talk part is recognizing that we've got to get better at understanding what we're looking at. And so put in that time and institutionally. And it's something that we're committed to doing. It's underway. We're not starting from scratch, but we have work to do. And the same is true for other media outlets across the region and across the country. They tend not to be very diverse, which I'm also going to be working on in my time at NPR. But even beyond that, like making sure, regardless of what someone looks like, that they are able to understand and connect across a wide range of communities here.
When you think about number of years down the road, what does success look like? What's the impact you mentioned earlier?
Mm-hmm.
That you want to, what's that impact look like at NPR when you move on to something else or retire?
Yeah, I want my time at NPR to when I reflect back on it, to be able to say that we not only grew membership, not only grew audience. Certainly I want that to be the case because I want more people to take advantage of what we have to offer. That's impact, right? Mm-hmm. But I also want the time to be one in which it's clear that we are serving even more parts of the region, that it's not viewed as an institution that's built for a subset of the state, but one that's built for the state and built in ways that meaningfully and intentionally connect with all of who we are, and in ways that make sense, help lace us together.
Duchesne, what's the most important characteristic of a leader?
I think probably the most important thing is communication, reflection and communication. And so you have to, the reflection part is being, aware both of your own individual and sort of collective strengths and flaws to make sure you're adjusting along the way. But the communication part is important because it can't just be in your head, right? You've got to be able to paint a vision for, and I think it's two-way communication, to be clear. You've got to paint a vision for where we're going and why, and do that over and over and over again, right? To make sure that you're in alignment across the organization. And it needs to be two-way because, we've got 200 people at NPR, right? I'm not as smart as 200 people are. And so, it's important to have an organization where the best ideas are bubbling up and coming together in ways that let you go from concept to reality as far as the way you, for us, do programming. And so I want to make sure that I'm being very clear about what our priorities are as an organization, but also that I'm taking advantage of the collective knowledge that we have as an institution. There's a ton of talent at NPR, just an incredible amount of talent and passion. It's public media attracts people who are about public service. And so I want to take full advantage of what they're thinking and what they're excited about doing. And so listening and communicating out those two things.
When there's been more talk about inclusive community these last months than maybe in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
When you think of inclusive community, what does that look like?
I think about just having a clear eye on who we are. Like, the Twin Cities metro area is about 25% or so people of color, which may surprise some folks, right? It certainly wasn't that diverse when I moved here in the early 90s. And so, what does that mean then about who our audience should be and what should they expect of us? And as I said earlier, how do we use our platforms, our tools, right, to connect them? How do we be one of the key places that they come to be informed and be entertained and to get their bearings on what this place is and where it's going, and to feel that we help them make good choices? I mean, we all have our own agency in how we're going to use our time and our other resources, right? I want MPR to be one of the places that people come to help them figure out where they want to invest their time and energy. And I think we do it already. I just think we could be even more impactful on that front. And when I think about inclusion, it's about making sure everyone feels like we are here for them.
Mm-hmm. We've had a number of conversations, and just talking to Paula Kerger with PBS a few days ago, we've talked with her a lot about civil discourse. And you and I have talked about this and about this right here. Yep. Can you talk about civil discourse for a minute?
Yeah, I think it's just so important for us to be able to hear one another and see one another, right? And so that means really listening. It means having the space be one where people can disagree, right? People should disagree at times if they feel strongly that this is the right way as opposed to that being the right way, but to do it in ways that aren't designed to burn people or institutions or relationships to the ground, but to do it in ways of defending one's position. And I think a lot of it centers on our willingness to hear and sit with things that we don't agree with or that make us uncomfortable. And how do we create spaces where people can do that, where they can come in and hear a perspective that runs counter to theirs in ways that they can absorb. And the goal's not brainwashing. I don't think we're all going to agree when it's all said and done on every single thing, but I think we could go a long way toward having more appreciation for, respect for one another if we at least understood each other more deeply. And I think that's often absent.
And as you're speaking, Duchesne, it makes me think of what differences there are between what news is and what commentary is, and what people seem to in our society today. There's polarizing commentary that gets twisted into these are the facts, which actually they're not. How do we unravel that? That's been tied up, that people associate these on both sides, we've talked about this, with what facts are and what news is, that, as you've said this so many times, what fact is, what history is what history is, what fact is fact. And I don't know where the question is here, but how can we unravel this?
Yeah, I think we need to create more spaces where people who are actually interested in learning the facts can do so. And so, we put a big premium on being a fact-based news organization. We don't do a lot of opinion. And then there's a place for opinion, right? It's not to denigrate that. It's just that's not, for us, a central feature, right? It's not why people come to us. And I think that if you give people the facts, they can form their own opinions, for one thing. And we live in a world at times where even facts are politicized, sadly, right? And so we can't control that, but I think it's important for us to as an institution that is committed to giving people information that they can use to make the best decisions that they can possibly make for themselves and for their families and their organizations, to stay focused on what the facts of the matter are, what people need to know. As I said, how we got to now, I think is a big piece of that. And to hopefully be a place that people of varying viewpoints and perspectives will come, because they trust us to be accurate and to be honest and to leave the slants on the side and just tell them what they need to know, and they can fill in the rest themselves. And hopefully to be a place where people are eager to come hear some other perspectives. I mean, that's another, I think, important piece of it is, I think we're all better when we get outside of our own echo chambers and have a chance to really hear what people who lead different lives see and want out of life.
What's the best piece of advice that you've received
Since I started?
In life.
In life?
Yeah.
So when I became a manager at the Star Tribune, I know it's been more than 15 years ago now, one of my mentors there pulled me aside and told me, don't wait for it to be perfect before you start enjoying it. and it's a guy named Paul Clauda, and it just stuck with me, because you're always working to make something better, right? I mean, the truth is, even when things are going well, if you're really honest and you're ambitious, there are things that could be better still. Mm-hmm. So his point was, certainly, drive toward, excellence and have an idea of what you're trying to achieve, but don't make the mistake of failing to enjoy the ride. Enjoy the day in, day out, enjoy the moments, the victories along the way, and don't wait for, perfection before you allow yourself to appreciate the great parts of what's playing on a daily basis. And I've tried to hold that constant, because there are good and bad days all along, right? And you can't wait for everything to fall in place before you have a chance to take a deep breath and smile about where you are.
Duchesne, one last question. Favorite piece of art or poetry?
Ooh. I think when I think about it, probably something that from an artistic standpoint that I've always sort of loved is Ansel Adams' work out of Yosemite. This black and white photography. I have a bunch of those images in my house, actually. Mm-hmm. I love nature. Mm-hmm. I love camping and hiking and boating and just being out and about. And so I can take any number of photos that he's taken and just stare into them forever. Mm. Just being out in nature just makes me really happy. And those are my best days, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Sean, thanks. Thank you for taking time this morning. I know you're super busy. It's a wonderful way to begin the day, and really privileged to have this conversation and your time yesterday with folks in Rapid City via Zoom. At this time, because of the pandemic, we're unable to provide you a piece of artwork from Black Hills Work Susie Kappa Art Center, unfortunately. So next time you're in Rapid City, we'll figure something out with that. But until then, we'll make a donation to the Arts Center in your name.
That's awesome.
Thank you for taking this time with us. And thanks everybody for joining us this morning. There'll be a survey online. Please fill it out and give us your feedback. And our next guest is Walter Woods from Humana Foundation, the president of Humana Foundation. He'll be joining us on August 7th. Duchesne, thank you so much. I hope you have a great rest of the day. Really appreciate your friendship.
Thank you, Matt. Same, Matt.
Bye now.
Take care.